My name is Walter, but everyone calls me Sarge. I'm 71 years old, and on what should have been a quiet, proud day, the anniversary of my wife passing, a day I always honored, everything changed. My own daughter stood up, said just a few words, and in seconds, I went from a father to a problem, from a man with a home to a man who needed help. I'm going to tell you what she did to me, how the person I raised, protected, and gave everything to used my memory lapses to steal my house, lock me away, and write me off as crazy. But before I begin, please let me know in the comments, where are you watching this from? To everyone here supporting this community, thank you. Your messages keep me going. And if this is your first time here, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. You're not just joining a channel, you're joining a family that believes no one should suffer in silence. Now, let me tell you my story. March 15th, Eleanor's Day. For 3 years now, I've marked this date the same way. Coffee at sunrise, her favorite lilacs on the kitchen table, and the whole morning spent talking to her picture like she's still here listening. Maybe that sounds crazy to you, but after 42 years of marriage, some habits die harder than the person you built them around. This year felt different from the moment I opened my eyes. Not the grief, that's become as familiar as breathing, but something else, a restlessness I couldn't name. I shuffled to the kitchen in my old army t-shirt and the flannel pants Eleanor bought me last Christmas. Yes, last Christmas. 3 months before the cancer took her. She knew she was dying when she wrapped those pants, but she still picked out the blue ones because they bring out your eyes, Walter. The coffee maker gave me trouble. Nothing new there. It's been acting up since Eleanor died. She always handled the morning routine while I read the paper, but standing there, pressing buttons that should have been automatic, I felt this fog creeping in, like trying to remember a dream that's already dissolving. Did I add water? Did I put the filter in? I stood there for what felt like 10 minutes, just staring at this machine I've used every day for 15 years. The panic started small, just a flutter in my chest, then grew into something bigger, something that made me question everything. When the coffee finally started brewing, I felt like I'd accomplished something monumental. Pathetic, right? A decorated veteran, proud homeowner, man who built a life with his bare hands, celebrating because he figured out his own coffee maker. I tried to shake it off, set Eleanor's picture on the table like always, arranged the lilacs I'd bought yesterday. Purple ones, just like she loved. But when I went to tell her about the strange morning I was having, the words came out wrong. Eleanor, honey, the thing with the... I stopped, started again. The coffee maker was being, that thing it does. That thing it does? What kind of explanation was that? Eleanor would have laughed at me, called me her scattered soldier. But she wasn't there to laugh, and I was talking to a photograph like a man who'd lost more than his wife. The doorbell rang at exactly 9 a.m. Sarah always was punctual, even as a little girl. Military precision, she used to joke. Learned it from the best. Morning, Daddy. She kissed my cheek, but something was off. Her smile looked practiced, like she'd been rehearsing it in the car. How are we doing today? We? When did I become a we? I'm fine, sweetheart. Just having coffee with your mother. Sarah's eyes flicked to the table, to Eleanor's picture surrounded by flowers, and I caught something in her expression. Not the gentle sadness she usually wore on this day, but something else. Something that looked almost like calculation. Daddy, we need to talk. The way she said it made my stomach drop. Not the warm, concerned tone she'd been using more and more lately, but something official. Cold. She sat across from me, in Eleanor's chair, and opened a folder she'd brought with her. Legal-looking papers spilled across the table, covering Eleanor's picture. I've been talking to Dr. Martinez about your episodes. What episodes? The confusion. The memory lapses. Yesterday you called me 3 times asking the same question about Mom's medication. You don't remember, do you? I wanted to argue, but the fog from this morning was still there, making me doubt myself. Had I called her yesterday? About medication? Eleanor's been gone for 3 years. Daddy, I love you, but we can't ignore this anymore. You're not safe living alone. Safe? I lived in this house for 37 years, raised Sarah here, built the deck out back with my own hands, fixed every leaky pipe, painted every room. This house was as much a part of me as my own heartbeat. I don't understand what you're saying, Sarah. She pulled out a paper from the folder. I've already spoken to a lawyer. For your protection, Daddy, until we can figure out what's happening with your mind, I need to help you make decisions. The words hit me like shrapnel. My mind. What was happening with my mind was grief, loneliness, the natural confusion that comes when your world gets cut in half. But the way she said it, like I was already gone, already lost. Sarah, I'm fine. A little scattered, maybe, but you left the stove on Tuesday night. Mrs. Patterson called me, said she could smell gas from next door. Had I? I couldn't remember Tuesday night. Or Wednesday. The days had been blending together since Eleanor died, but that was normal, wasn't it? That was grief, not madness. I just need some time to adjust. Since your mother, it's not just grief anymore, Daddy. Her voice was gentle but final. I've made an appointment for you to see Dr. Martinez next week. We're going to figure this out together. Together. But looking at her across Eleanor's table, surrounded by legal papers I didn't understand, I'd never felt more alone in my life. She left an hour later, taking the folder with her but leaving something behind, a doubt that settled in my chest like a stone. As I watched her drive away, I noticed she was in a different car. Not the old Honda she'd been driving for years, but something newer, shinier. When had she gotten a new car? Dr. Martinez has been my physician for 15 years. Delivered Sarah's babies. Held my hand when Eleanor got her diagnosis. The man who'd always treated me like family suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. Walter, I need to ask you some questions. Standard cognitive assessment. Standard? Nothing about this felt standard. Sarah sat beside me in the too bright examination room, her hands folded like she was attending a funeral. Maybe she was. What year is it? 2024. And what month? I hesitated. March. Good. Can you tell me what you had for breakfast this morning? Breakfast. This morning felt like a lifetime ago. I remembered coffee, Eleanor's picture, lilacs on the table. But breakfast. The fog rolled in again, thick and suffocating. Coffee. I had coffee. Anything else? Sarah leaned forward slightly. I could feel her watching me, waiting for me to fail some test I didn't know I was taking. Toast, maybe? I usually have toast. Dr. Martinez made notes. The scratch of his pen sounded like fingernails on a coffin lid. Walter, I'm going to say 3 words. I want you to remember them, okay? Apple, penny, table. Apple, penny, table. Easy enough. The questions continued. Some I answered fine. My address, Eleanor's maiden name, my service record. Others felt like trying to catch smoke with my bare hands. Dates blurred together. Recent conversations became suspects in a lineup I couldn't identify. Now, can you recall those 3 words I mentioned earlier? My mind went blank. Completely, utterly blank. Like someone had erased a chalkboard while I wasn't looking. Apple, I said, grasping at straws. Penny, and... The silence stretched between us. Sarah's hand found mine, and for a moment I felt grateful for her presence. Then I caught the look she exchanged with Dr. Martinez, a look that said everything I needed to know and nothing I wanted to hear. Walter, I'm concerned about some cognitive decline. Given your age and these symptoms, I'd like to run some additional tests. Cognitive decline. The words hit like a physical blow. What kind of tests? Brain imaging, blood work, a more comprehensive neurological evaluation. You think I have? I don't want to jump to conclusions, but Sarah's right to be concerned. The memory issues, the confusion, leaving appliances on, these could be early signs of dementia. Dementia. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. The drive home was quiet. Sarah kept glancing at me like I might disappear at any moment. When we pulled into my driveway at my house that I owned free and clear, she didn't immediately get out. "Daddy, we need to talk about practical things." "What kind of practical things?" "Your care, this house, making sure you're safe and provided for." She pulled out more papers from that same folder. Everything was always in folders now, official and final. "I've been researching memory care facilities, just to explore options." "Sarah, slow down. I haven't even had the other tests yet. Dr. Martinez said, 'Daddy, I can't watch you deteriorate alone in this big house. What if you fall? What if there's a fire? What if you wander off and get lost? What if? She was building a case against me, and I was too stunned to mount a defense. This is my home. I know, and it always will be. But homes can be sold, Daddy. The money can go toward the best possible care for you." Sold. She wanted to sell the house Eleanor and I built our life in. The house where Sarah took her first steps, where we celebrated every Christmas, where Eleanor died in our bed surrounded by 42 years of memories. I'm not ready for that conversation. But we need to be. I've already spoken to a real estate agent, just to get an idea of market value. Did you know this house is worth almost $600,000 now? $600,000. I'd bought it for $32,000 in 1987. Built equity slowly, payment by payment, until it was ours completely. Eleanor had been so proud the day we burned the mortgage papers. "Sarah, I appreciate your concern, but Daddy, listen to me." Her voice changed, became something sharper. "You left the stove on. You can't remember conversations we had yesterday. You're calling me at 3 a.m. asking about Mom's medications when she's been dead for 3 years. 3 a.m. calls? I had no memory of that, but the way she said it, with such certainty, made me doubt everything. Maybe I should write things down more, keep better track. It's beyond that now." She was already shaking her head. "I've done research. Memory care facilities have trained staff, activities to keep your mind engaged, medical support around the clock. You'd be safer there." Safer. That word again. Like I was a danger to myself, to others. Like the man who'd served 2 tours in Vietnam, who'd built a business from nothing, who'd cared for his dying wife with his own hands, was suddenly incapable of existing in the world. I need time to think about all this. Of course, but Daddy, time isn't something we have a lot of. These conditions progress quickly. The sooner we act, the more options we have. She drove away in that new car again. I stood in my driveway watching her taillights disappear, feeling like a stranger in my own life. Inside, I made dinner. Soup from a can, crackers, a beer I probably shouldn't have with my medications. But which medications? There were bottles on the counter I didn't remember taking from the pharmacy. Prescriptions with my name, but dates that seemed wrong. I tried to call my neighbor, Bill Patterson, just to talk to someone who'd known me before I became a problem to be solved. His wife answered. "Oh, Walter, I'm sorry, but Bill's not available right now." Something in her voice was different, distant, like she was talking to a stranger instead of the man who'd helped them move in 15 years ago. "Is everything okay, Linda?" We're very busy these days. I'll tell him you called." She hung up before I could ask what I'd done wrong. That night I sat at the kitchen table with Eleanor's picture, trying to piece together what was happening to me. The tests would come back, and they'd either prove Sarah wrong or prove her right. But either way, I was starting to understand that the results might not matter as much as I thought they would. The decision had already been made. I was just the last to know about it. The whispers started 3 weeks after my doctor's appointment. Subtle at first, conversations that stopped when I walked into Murphy's Hardware, cashiers who couldn't quite look me in the eye, neighbors who suddenly found urgent reasons to go back inside when I waved from my porch. I first noticed it when I went to buy birdseed at the grocery store. Eleanor always kept feeders in the backyard, and I'd been maintaining them like a sacred ritual. The young clerk, Tommy, I think his name was, seemed nervous as he scanned my items. "How are you doing today, Mr. Thompson?" "Fine, son. How's your mother?" He looked confused. "My mother? Linda. She works at the bank, doesn't she?" "No, sir. My mom's been dead for 5 years." The embarrassment hit like a slap. I'd confused him with someone else, some other young man from some other family. But the look on his face wasn't just confusion. It was fear, like I was a puzzle with missing pieces, dangerous because you couldn't predict what shape I'd take next. "I'm sorry, I mixed you up with someone else." "It's okay, Mr. Thompson. Happens to everyone." But his hands shook as he gave me my change. Walking to my truck, I heard them talking, Tommy and the bag boy, voices low but not low enough. "Sarah says he's getting worse. Found him in his yard at midnight last week. Couldn't remember where he was." "Midnight? In my yard?" I tried to remember last week, but the days had been blending together like watercolors in the rain. My grandmother was like that before we had to put her somewhere safe. Put her somewhere safe. That phrase followed me home like a curse. The incident at Peterson's pharmacy happened 2 days later. I'd gone to pick up refills, the same medications I'd been taking for years, but the pharmacist, Dave Peterson, treated me like I was ordering explosives. "Walter, I need to call Sarah before I can release these." "Why? They're my prescriptions." "She requested that we coordinate with her on all your medications, for safety reasons." Safety reasons. There was that word again. I was becoming unsafe in a town where I'd lived peacefully for decades. "Dave, I've been picking up my own medication since before you took over from your father." "I know, Walter, but things change. Sarah's just looking out for you." He made the call while I waited, feeling like a child who needed permission to exist in his own life. The other customers in line behind me shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to listen, but hanging on every word. "Sarah, it's Dave at the pharmacy. Your father's here for his refills." "Okay. Yes, I'll explain that to him." He hung up and turned back to me with that practiced sympathy everyone was wearing around me these days. "She's coming to pick them up herself. Says it's better if she manages them for you." "I can manage my own pills, Dave." "Of course you can. But maybe it's easier this way. One less thing to worry about." Easier for who? The real blow came that evening. I was grilling a burger on my back porch, something I'd done thousands of times, when Linda Patterson appeared at the fence between our properties. "Walter, could I talk to you for a minute?" Linda had been our neighbor for 15 years. She and Eleanor used to swap recipes, gossip about the mailman's new route, complain about kids cutting through their gardens. But standing there in my own backyard, she looked at me like I was a stranger. "Linda, of course. How's Bill?" "He's fine. Walter, I need to ask you something, and I hope you won't take offense." My stomach dropped. "Go ahead." "Yesterday, around 2 in the afternoon, you came to our door. You seemed confused, asking about Eleanor, wanting to know if she was inside." "Eleanor? At their house?" "I don't remember that." "You were agitated. When I told you Eleanor had passed away 3 years ago, you became angry, started shouting about how we were hiding her from you." The words hit me like physical blows. Shouting at Linda. About Eleanor. I searched my memory desperately but found nothing. Just empty space where yesterday afternoon should have been. "Linda, I would never—" "I know you wouldn't mean to frighten anyone, Walter, but Bill and I were concerned. Sarah says you've been having episodes." "Episodes? Like I was a television show instead of a man." "We love you, Walter, you know that. But we have grandchildren who visit and—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "You think I'm dangerous?" "Not dangerous, just unpredictable. And that scares people." After she left, I sat on my porch until dark, trying to remember going to their house, trying to remember asking about Eleanor. But there was nothing, just a black hole where part of my life used to be. That night, I called Sarah. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. "Daddy, are you okay?" "Sarah, Linda Patterson says I went to her house yesterday, that I was confused about your mother." Silence on the other end. Then, "We need to talk about this in person. I'm coming over." "You don't need to." "Yes, I do. You can't keep pretending these episodes aren't happening." She arrived 20 minutes later with that folder again, but this time there were more papers inside, official-looking documents with legal letterhead. "Daddy, sit down." I sat at my own kitchen table like a guest in my own home. "The incidents are escalating. Mrs. Patterson called me yesterday, very upset. She said you were demanding to see Mom, that when she tried to explain, you became hostile." "I don't remember being hostile." "That's the problem, Daddy. You don't remember, but it's happening, and it's scaring people." She spread the papers across the table. "I've been consulting with an elder care attorney. Given your condition and these episodes, I think we need to consider guardianship." Guardianship. The word hit like a death sentence. What does that mean? It means I'd be legally responsible for your care, your medical decisions, your finances, your living situation, until you're stable again. And if I refuse? Her eyes filled with tears. Real ones, I thought. "Daddy, you threatened Mrs. Patterson. You're taking medications you don't remember. You're calling me at all hours asking about Mom. The doctor says it's only going to get worse." "What doctor?" "Dr. Martinez said we needed more tests." "I got a second opinion. Dr. Williams is a specialist in geriatric psychiatry. He reviewed your case." My case. I had become a case. "Sarah, please, this is my home, my life. And I want you to keep as much of it as possible, but not if it means you're going to hurt yourself or someone else." She gathered up the papers. "I'm filing the petition tomorrow. It's temporary, just until we can get you the help you need." After she left, I stood in my empty house surrounded by 40 years of memories, feeling like I was already gone. The man who'd built this life, who'd earned this peace, was disappearing one forgotten moment at a time. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered that forgetting wasn't always the same as never knowing. And sometimes the most dangerous thing about a man isn't what he can't remember. It's what he's starting to figure out. The knock came at 7 a.m. sharp. 3 men in dark suits standing on my porch like pallbearers. Behind them, Sarah's new car gleamed in my driveway, a red Tesla that probably cost more than I made in my best year at the construction company. "Walter Thompson?" "That's me." The tallest one stepped forward. "I'm Attorney Mitchell from Crawford and Associates. This is Mr. Davidson from Adult Protective Services, and Dr. Williams, the psychiatric evaluator." My legs went weak. Sarah had warned me this was coming, but seeing it happen felt like watching my own execution. "We need to discuss your situation, Mr. Thompson. May we come in?" My situation. Like I was a problem to be solved instead of a man standing in his own doorway. They filed into my living room, with Eleanor's furniture and my Purple Hearts on the mantel, and spread papers across my coffee table like they were dividing up an estate. Sarah followed behind them, her eyes red but determined. "Daddy, please just listen to what they have to say." Attorney Mitchell opened a leather briefcase. "Mr. Thompson, your daughter has petitioned the court for temporary guardianship based on concerns about your mental capacity and recent behavioral incidents." "What behavioral incidents?" Dr. Williams consulted his tablet. "Threatening neighbors, medication confusion, episodes of disorientation, inappropriate calls to family members. The pattern suggests progressive cognitive decline, requiring immediate intervention." Progressive cognitive decline. They had a name for what they thought I was becoming. "I'd like to see Dr. Martinez. He's been my doctor for 15 years. "Dr. Martinez referred your case to me." Dr. Williams said smoothly. Geriatric psychiatry requires specialized expertise. Referred my case. When had that happened? I tried to remember my last appointment with Martinez, but the memories felt slippery, like trying to hold water in my hands. Mr. Davidson from Adult Protective Services leaned forward. Mr. Thompson, we've received multiple reports about your welfare. Neighbors are concerned. Your daughter is concerned. We need to ensure your safety and the safety of others. What others? I live alone. I bother nobody. Yesterday you were found in Mrs. Patterson's backyard at midnight, confused about your location. Dr. Williams read from his notes. You believed your deceased wife was inside their home. Midnight? In their backyard? The words hit me like a physical blow. I searched my memory desperately but found only darkness where last night should have been. I don't remember that. The four of them exchanged looks, the kind of looks that said everything I needed to know and nothing I wanted to hear. Attorney Mitchell slid a document across the table. This is a temporary guardianship order. It gives your daughter legal authority over your medical, financial, and residential decisions until a full competency hearing can be scheduled. The papers blurred before my eyes, legal language that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. But I caught enough words to understand. Incapacitated, unable to care for himself, immediate intervention required. What does this mean for my house? Your daughter will have authority to make decisions about your living situation and assets, Mitchell explained. If residential care becomes necessary, your property may need to be liquidated to cover costs. Liquidated. They wanted to melt down my life and pour it into someone else's pocket. Sarah, please. This house is all I have left of your mother. Her voice cracked when she answered. Daddy, Mom wouldn't want you living somewhere dangerous. She'd want you safe and cared for. I am safe. This is my home. Dr. Williams made notes on his tablet. The patient shows resistance to necessary care interventions. Classic presentation of anosognosia. Inability to recognize his own condition. Anosognosia. Another word for what they thought was wrong with me. Another box to put me in. Mr. Thompson, Davidson said, we understand this is difficult, but these episodes are escalating. Last week you called 911 claiming someone had broken into your house. When police arrived, you couldn't explain what had been stolen. Called 911? I had no memory of that either, but the way he said it, with such official certainty, made me doubt everything I thought I knew about my own life. Maybe I should call my lawyer. You're welcome to legal representation at the competency hearing, Mitchell said, but this temporary order is effective immediately. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. Daddy, I found a wonderful place. Sunset Manor. It's not like those horrible nursing homes you see in movies. It's more like a resort. Private rooms, activities, medical staff available around the clock. Sunset Manor. Even the name sounded like dying. I don't want to go to a facility. Just temporarily, Sarah said quickly, until we figure out the best way to manage your condition. My condition. I was becoming a condition instead of a father. They stayed for 2 hours, explaining procedures and timelines and legal requirements. I signed where they told me to sign, feeling like I was signing my own death warrant. The temporary guardianship would last 60 days, giving them time to assess my needs and develop a care plan. After they left, I sat alone in my living room surrounded by boxes Sarah had brought for packing. She said I could bring personal items to Sunset Manor, clothes, photos, maybe Eleanor's jewelry box, the essential pieces of a life that had taken 71 years to build. When do I have to leave? Monday morning. I'm sorry, Daddy. I know it seems fast, but Dr. Williams says delays can make transitions more traumatic. Monday morning. 3 days to say goodbye to everything I'd ever worked for. What about my truck? You shouldn't be driving anymore. Not with the confusion episodes. My truck. I'd bought it new in 2019, the first new vehicle I'd ever owned. Eleanor had insisted, said I'd worked hard enough to deserve something that wouldn't break down on me. Now it would sit in my driveway, collecting dust while I collected dust somewhere else. That evening, I walked through every room of my house like I was touring a museum. The kitchen where Eleanor had made thousands of meals. The living room where we'd watched Sarah take her first steps. The bedroom where we'd made love and fought and made up and dreamed about the future together. I found myself in Sarah's old room, looking at the walls we'd painted pink when she was 7. She'd insisted on doing it herself, getting more paint on the floor than the walls. Eleanor had been furious, but I'd laughed and helped her finish the job. The little girl who'd painted these walls with such joy was now dismantling my life with legal documents and psychiatric evaluations. When had she stopped being my daughter and started being my guardian? I tried to remember the moment it changed, but like so many other memories lately, it felt just out of reach. Maybe that was the real tragedy. Not just losing my house or my independence, but losing the ability to trust my own mind about when and why I'd lost them. Monday morning came with the speed of bad news. Sarah arrived at 8 a.m. with a van from Sunset Manor. "For your comfort and safety," the driver explained, like I was precious cargo instead of a man being displaced from his own life. I carried Eleanor's jewelry box to the van myself, holding it like it contained her ashes instead of her earrings. In a way, I suppose it did contain what was left of her, the tangible pieces of a love that had lasted longer than most people's entire lives. As we pulled away from 412 Maple Street, I looked back at the house where I'd planned to die peacefully in my own bed. The for sale sign wasn't up yet, but I could already see it there, marking the spot where Walter Thompson used to live. Sarah squeezed my hand. "It's going to be okay, Daddy. You'll see." But looking at her face in the reflection of the van window, I wondered if she was trying to convince me or herself. Sunset Manor looked like a hotel designed by someone who'd never met an old person. All polished surfaces and artificial plants, with that particular smell of industrial disinfectant, trying to mask something deeper and sadder. "Welcome to your new home, Mr. Thompson." The intake coordinator, a woman named Brenda with aggressively cheerful energy, led us through the lobby. "You're going to love it here." Love it? Like loving had anything to do with being warehoused. My room was on the 2nd floor. The memory care wing, Brenda explained, as if forgetting where I put my keys was the same as forgetting my own name. Room 237, with a window that looked out on the parking lot instead of the garden they'd promised in the brochure. "This is lovely, Daddy." Sarah set my suitcase on the single bed. "Look, you can see the mountains from here." I could see mountains, barely visible through the haze beyond the parking lot where families dropped off their inconveniences and drove away in clean cars. "Mr. Thompson, let me explain our schedule," Brenda said, consulting her tablet. Everyone had tablets now, like human conversation required electronic mediation. "Breakfast is at 8, activities at 10, lunch at noon, dinner at 5, and quiet time begins at 9 p.m. Quiet time, like I was in kindergarten instead of the final act of my own life. "What kind of activities?" "Oh, we have the wonderful programs. Bingo, crafts, sing-alongs, movie afternoons. Very engaging for our memory care residents." Memory care residents. Another euphemism for people whose minds had betrayed them. Sarah stayed for an hour, helping me put clothes in the small dresser and arrange Eleanor's photos on the nightstand. When it was time for her to leave, she hugged me longer than usual. "I'll visit every week, Daddy. Maybe more." "Sarah, how long am I going to be here?" "We'll take it one day at a time. Dr. Williams wants to try some new medications, see if we can slow the progression." Progression, like I was a disease instead of her father. After she left, I sat on my narrow bed and tried to understand how my life had narrowed to this. One room, one window, one small dresser for 71 years of living. My roommate was a man named Eddie who hadn't spoken in 2 years, according to the aide who introduced us. He sat in his chair by the window, staring at nothing, occasionally making sounds that might have been words in some language I didn't recognize. Eddie was a professor, the aide told me quietly. Literature. Sometimes he still recites poetry, but mostly he just— She didn't finish the sentence. Eddie just existed, like a ghost haunting his own life. That first week blurred together like a fever dream. Meals at precise times, medications dispensed like communion, activities designed to keep us busy until death arrived to collect us. I tried to participate, sat through bingo games where the prizes were tiny bottles of hand lotion, listened to a volunteer read from a romance novel like we were children at story time. The other residents seemed to fall into two categories: the ones who'd given up completely and the ones who still fought against the slow erasure of everything they used to be. I wanted to be in the second group, but the place wore you down like water on stone. "Walter, you have a visitor," an aide announced one Tuesday morning. I expected Sarah, but instead found a man in an expensive suit waiting in the family conference room. "Mr. Thompson, I'm James Crawford from Crawford & Associates. I represent your daughter's interests in the guardianship proceeding." Sarah's interests, not mine. "I wanted to discuss the sale of your property. We've had several interested buyers." "Sale?" Sarah said this was temporary. Crawford consulted his files. "The costs of memory care are substantial, Mr. Thompson. Your daughter is exploring all options to ensure you receive the best possible treatment." "How much does this place cost?" $8,000 per month, plus additional fees for specialized care, medications, activities. $8,000 a month. No wonder they needed to sell my house. "What about my savings, my pension?" "Those will be exhausted within 6 months at current care levels. The house sale will provide security for your long-term needs." Long-term needs. Like I was going to need this place for years instead of weeks. "Mr. Thompson, I need to be direct with you. Your daughter has your best interests at heart, but these decisions can't wait for your condition to deteriorate further." My condition. Everyone kept talking about my condition like it was a fact instead of an opinion. After Crawford left, I walked to the common area and sat among the other residents. Mrs. Chen was working on a jigsaw puzzle, the same 50-piece landscape she completed every day, then forgot she'd done. Mr. Rodriguez stared at a soap opera with the sound turned off, occasionally laughing at jokes only he could hear. Was this my future? Endless repetition punctuated by brief moments of confusion? I tried to imagine Sarah visiting me here in 5 years, 10 years, talking to whatever was left of me like I was already gone. That evening, I called Sarah from the phone in the hallway. She answered on the first ring, like always. "Daddy, are you okay?" "A lawyer came to see me today. Crawford. He says you're selling the house." Silence on the other end. Then, "Daddy, we talked about this. The care costs. How much are you getting for it?" "The market assessment was $650,000. $650,000 for the house I'd bought for $32,000. The house where Eleanor and I had built our entire life together. At $8,000 a month, that money will last me about 6 years. "Daddy, that's a long time. Medical advances happen quickly these days. And if I live longer than 6 years? Another pause. We'll figure something out. We'll figure something out. Like my life was a puzzle that could be solved with enough legal documents and good intentions. "Sarah, I want to come home." "Daddy, you can't. Not yet. Dr. Williams says you need structured care at least until the medications start working." "What medications? I feel the same as I did before I came here." "That's part of the disease, Daddy. You don't always recognize your own symptoms." Disease. When had my grief become a disease? After I hung up, I walked back to my room where Eddie sat in his chair, staring at the parking lot. Sometimes I wondered if he was the smart one, just checking out completely instead of fighting a battle he couldn't win. "Eddie, were you really a professor?" He turned to look at me, and for just a moment his eyes seemed to focus. "Once," he said clearly, Once I was many things. Then he turned back to the window, and I was alone again with the weight of understanding that this place wasn't about getting better. It was about managing the process of becoming less than what you used to be, one day at a time, until there wasn't enough left to matter. But late that night, lying in my narrow bed listening to Eddie breathe in the darkness, something stirred in me that felt almost like anger. Or maybe it was hope. Sometimes they're the same thing. 3 weeks into my stay at Sunset Manor, Sarah came for her regular Wednesday visit. But this time, something was different. She seemed lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. And when I looked out my window, I understood why. The red Tesla gleamed in the parking lot like a jewel among the sensible sedans and minivans that usually brought family members to visit their forgotten relatives. "Sarah, when did you get that car?" She followed my gaze to the window. "Oh, that. Last month. My Honda finally died, and I needed reliable transportation to visit you here." Last month. Right around the time she'd started talking about my condition. Right around the time the lawyers and doctors had materialized with their folders full of papers I didn't understand. That's the expensive car for someone who couldn't afford her mortgage 6 months ago. Her smile faltered. "Daddy, I've been managing some financial changes, better budgeting, some investment income." Investment income. I'd worked in construction for 40 years, and I knew what things cost. That Tesla represented more money than Sarah had ever seen at one time in her life. "How much did it cost?" "Daddy, we don't need to worry about that right now. How are you feeling? Are they taking good care of you?" She was changing the subject, but something in my mind, the part that felt clearer here than it had in months, wouldn't let it go. "Sarah, I want to know how you afforded that car. I told you, better financial management." "Show me." "What?" "Show me your bank statements, your investment accounts. If you're doing so well financially, I want to see how." For the first time since this whole nightmare started, Sarah looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Daddy, that's personal. And frankly, with your condition, these kinds of complex financial discussions might be confusing for you." My condition. She was using my supposed mental decline as a shield against my questions. "I built a business from nothing, Sarah. I managed investments and mortgages and tax planning for decades. My condition hasn't made me stupid." "Of course not. I didn't mean—" "Then show me how you went from struggling to pay your bills to driving a car that costs more than most people make in a year." She gathered her purse like she was preparing to leave. "Daddy, you're getting agitated. Maybe I should call Dr. Williams." "Don't you dare call Dr. Williams. I'm asking my daughter a simple question about her sudden wealth." "It's not sudden. I've been working with a financial advisor making smarter choices." "What financial advisor?" "James Crawford. He's helped me restructure some things." Crawford, the lawyer who'd visited me about selling my house, the one who represented Sarah's interests, not mine. "Sarah, sit down." Something in my voice made her comply, but she perched on the edge of the visitor chair like she might need to run. "Crawford told me the house is worth $650,000. "Yes." "And this place costs $8,000 a month." "Yes." "So the house sale will pay for about 6.5 years of care." "Daddy, we've been through this. Have you already sold it?" The question hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire that was just starting to catch. "The sale is pending. We found a buyer who loves it, a young family with children. Mom would have liked that. Would have liked that. Using Eleanor's memory to justify dismantling the life we'd built together." "How much are you getting from the sale?" "The full asking price, $650. "And how much of that goes to pay Crawford? And the other lawyers? And Dr. Williams?" "Daddy, those are just standard professional fees." "How much, Sarah?" She looked out the window at her Tesla, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Something that looked almost like guilt. "About $40,000 in total professional fees." $40,000. Enough to buy a nice used car, but not enough to buy a Tesla. "Sarah, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I may have some memory issues, and I may get confused about small things, but I'm not an idiot. That car cost at least $70,000. Where did the extra money come from? Daddy, you're making me uncomfortable. Maybe I should go. Maybe you should answer my question. She stood up, smoothing her skirt like she was preparing for a job interview instead of talking to her father. I don't like your tone. You're becoming paranoid, seeing conspiracies where there aren't any. Paranoid. Another symptom to add to my growing list of mental defects. Sarah, before you leave, I want you to know something. My mind may not be what it used to be, but there's nothing wrong with my ability to add and subtract, and those numbers don't add up to a Tesla. I'm calling Dr. Williams. You need an adjustment to your medications. She left without kissing me goodbye, without the usual promises to visit again soon. I watched from my window as she walked to that gleaming red car, her posture straight and confident like someone who'd just solved a problem that had been bothering her for months. That evening at dinner, I sat with Mrs. Chen and Mr. Rodriguez, pushing institutional meatloaf around my plate and thinking about money, about timing, about the convenient coincidence of my sudden mental decline and Sarah's sudden financial improvement. Mrs. Chen, how long have you been here? She looked up from her own untouched dinner. 2 years. My son says it's temporary until I get better. Do people get better here? She laughed, a sound like dry leaves. Nobody gets better here, Walter. We just get more expensive. More expensive. Like we were commodities being processed instead of human beings being cared for. Mr. Rodriguez, what about you? 3 years, he said clearly. My daughter needed the money from my condo to start her business. Said it was an investment in our family's future. An investment. Like our homes were just financial instruments waiting to be liquidated. That night, I lay in my narrow bed listening to Eddie's breathing and thinking about patterns. Sarah's new car, the convenient timing of my diagnosis, the lawyers who appeared overnight with papers that transferred control of everything I owned. For the first time since this nightmare started, my mind felt clear. Crystal clear. Not confused or foggy or unreliable, but sharp as the day I'd mustered out of the army with 2 Purple Hearts and a determination to build something lasting. And what I saw with that clarity scared me more than any enemy I'd ever faced in combat. My own daughter was stealing my life, piece by piece, and using my grief-addled mind as cover for the theft. The question was, what was I going to do about it? For 3 weeks, I'd been the model patient, took my medications without complaint, participated in activities, smiled when the staff asked how I was feeling, but every night I lay awake planning. The night shift at Sunset Manor was skeleton crew, 1 nurse for 40 residents, a security guard who spent most of his time in the lobby watching TV. Between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., the place became a tomb where the living dead waited for morning to bring another day of managed decline. I'd been studying the routines, memorizing schedules, noting which doors stayed unlocked and which cameras actually worked. Old habits from Vietnam, you always scout your exit routes before you need them. Eddie was my unwitting accomplice. His nighttime wandering was legendary among the staff. Eddie's taking his midnight constitutional, they'd say, barely looking up from their paperwork as he shuffled down the halls in his slippers and bathrobe. They'd gotten so used to his harmless wandering that one more old man in the hallway wouldn't raise any alarms. At 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night, I made my move. I'd been fully dressed under my pajamas for hours, jeans, work boots, the flannel shirt Eleanor had bought me for our last Christmas together. In my jacket pocket, I carried the only things that mattered, my wallet, Eleanor's wedding ring, and a key to my house that Sarah didn't know I'd hidden in the lining of my suitcase. The hallway was empty, lit by the dim safety lights that made everything look like an old photograph. I walked slowly, deliberately, like a man who belonged there but had simply gotten turned around looking for the bathroom. The side exit near the laundry room was my target, a fire door that led to the delivery area behind the kitchen. During my weeks of observation, I'd noticed that the alarm was disabled during the day for deliveries and never rearmed at night. Sunset Manor's security was designed to keep people out, not keep people in. The door opened silently into the cool night air. For the first time in 3 weeks, I breathed air that didn't smell like disinfectant and resignation. The walk into town took 40 minutes. My legs, weakened by weeks of institutional living, protested every step, but my mind felt clearer than it had in months. Crystal clear, like fog lifting from a battlefield to reveal the true positions of friend and enemy. I knew exactly where I was going. The Greyhound station was a relic from the 1960s, all cracked vinyl and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look dead. The night clerk was a kid with multiple piercings who didn't look up from his phone when I approached the counter. I need a ticket to Springfield. Next bus leaves at 6:15 a.m., $57. Springfield, where the county courthouse held the records of every property transaction, every deed, every legal document that proved ownership of land and buildings, where the truth lived in filing cabinets and computer databases that couldn't lie or forget or get confused about who owned what. I bought my ticket and settled into a plastic chair to wait for dawn. Around me, the usual collection of night travelers dozed or stared at phones or had quiet conversations with invisible companions. Nobody paid attention to one more old man with nowhere else to go. At exactly 6:15 a.m., I climbed aboard the bus that would carry me back to my old life. As Springfield grew larger in the windshield, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Eleanor's death. Purpose. The Springfield County Courthouse was a monument to bureaucratic permanence. All marble columns and bronze plaques commemorating officials whose names nobody remembered. But inside those walls lived the paper trail of my life. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, property deeds, tax records, the truth. I need to see the property records for 412 Maple Street, Millbrook, I told the clerk in the records office. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who reminded me of Eleanor's sister. "Are you the property owner?" "Yes, Walter Thompson." She led me to a computer terminal and showed me how to search the database. "These records go back to 1950. Let me know if you need help." But I didn't need help. I knew exactly what I was looking for. The original deed from 1987 showed Eleanor Marie Thompson and Walter James Thompson as joint owners. The mortgage payments, faithfully recorded month by month, year by year, until the final payment in 2010. Paid in full, free and clear. Then I found what I was really looking for, the recent activity. 3 months ago, right around the time Sarah started talking about my episodes, a new deed had been filed, an emergency guardianship transfer that signed over half ownership of my property to Sarah Thompson, for the care and protection of an incapacitated individual. Incapacitated individual. That's what I'd become in the eyes of the law. But there was more. 2 weeks ago, while I was playing bingo at Sunset Manor, a sales contract had been filed. 412 Maple Street. Sold to the Morrison family for $650,000. Closing date, next Friday. Next Friday. 5 days from now. I printed everything, every deed, every transfer, every document that told the story of how my life had been dismantled while I was supposedly too confused to understand what was happening to me. The bank was my next stop. First National, where I'd done business for 30 years, where they knew my name, my signature, my wife's laugh when she'd come in to make deposits from her part-time job at the library. "Mr. Thompson," the branch manager, Carol Peterson, seemed genuinely surprised to see me. "I heard you were... How are you feeling?" "I'm feeling like a man who wants to see his account records, Carol." She looked uncomfortable. "Well, of course, but I understood that your daughter now has power of attorney over your financial affairs. Show me when that power of attorney was signed." She pulled up my file on her computer, her expression growing more troubled with each screen she reviewed. "It says here that you signed the documents on March 22nd, giving Sarah full financial authority due to cognitive impairment." March 22nd. I remembered that day clearly now. The day the lawyers came to my house with their folders and their official voices. The day I'd signed papers I was told were just temporary measures. Carol, I want you to look at me. Do I seem cognitively impaired to you right now? She studied my face with the careful attention of someone who'd known me for decades. You seem yourself, Walter. Maybe tired, but certainly not impaired. Then I want to see what Sarah has done with my money. The printouts told a story that made my stomach turn. 3 large withdrawals in the past month, $75,000, $25,000, and $15,000. The first withdrawal was dated the same day Sarah had shown up at Sunset Manor in her Tesla. Carol, who authorized these withdrawals? Your daughter. She had proper power of attorney documentation. And you didn't think to call me? To verify that I actually wanted to give away $115,000? Carol's face flushed. Walter, we were told you weren't. That you wouldn't be able to understand financial matters anymore. Weren't able to understand. Like I'd become a child who needed protecting from his own money. I gathered up all my documents, the property records, the bank statements, the proof of what had been done to me while I was locked away in a place designed to manage my decline instead of questioning its cause. Standing on the courthouse steps with the evidence of my daughter's betrayal heavy in my hands, I felt something I hadn't felt since Eleanor died. I felt like myself again. Sharp, clear, ready to fight. Sarah had used my grief and confusion to steal my life, but grief wasn't the same as stupidity, and confusion wasn't the same as incompetence. It was time to go home and take back what was mine. The question was whether I'd be strong enough to face what I found there. The taxi dropped me at 412 Maple Street just as the sun was setting. My house, still my house despite what the paperwork said, looked exactly the same from the outside. Same blue shutters Eleanor had insisted on painting herself. Same crooked mailbox I'd been meaning to fix for 3 years. Same rosebush in the front yard that bloomed every spring like a promise that some things endure. But there was a sign now. A real estate sign driven into the front lawn like a stake through the heart of everything I'd built. Sold, in bold red letters across the top. Closing Friday, in smaller print below. Friday, 3 days away. I used my hidden key to open the front door, half expecting alarms to sound or security guards to appear. But the house welcomed me back with the familiar creak of floorboards and the lingering scent of Eleanor's lavender sachets in the closets. Inside, everything had been staged for sale. My furniture rearranged to look inviting to strangers. Family photos packed away and replaced with generic artwork that suggested happiness without demanding commitment. The house had been transformed from a home into a product. But they hadn't found everything. In my bedroom closet, behind the winter coats Eleanor could never bring herself to throw away, I kept a small fireproof safe. Sarah knew about it, had even suggested I keep important documents there, but she'd never bothered to learn the combination. It was Eleanor's birthday, 04175 Inside the safe, I found what I'd come for, the original deed from 1987, our marriage certificate, Eleanor's life insurance policy that had paid off the mortgage, my military discharge papers, the will Eleanor and I had written together, leaving everything to Sarah, but only after both of us were gone. The real evidence, though, was what I'd gathered at the courthouse and bank. I spread it all across the kitchen table like a detective laying out clues. Property transfers signed in my name while I was supposedly incapacitated. Bank withdrawals authorized by power of attorney documents I'd never willingly signed. Medical evaluations that predated any actual symptoms. The pattern was there, methodical and damning. Sarah hadn't just taken advantage of my confusion, she'd helped create it. I picked up the phone and called Attorney Mitchell's office. His secretary tried to screen the call, but I used the voice I'd perfected as a sergeant in Vietnam, the one that cut through bureaucracy like a blade through silk. "This is Walter Thompson. Put Mitchell on the line, now." "Mr. Thompson, It's after hours. Ma'am, I'm sitting in the house your client is trying to steal from me, looking at documents that prove fraud. Mr. Mitchell has exactly 2 minutes to pick up this phone before I call the State Attorney General. Mitchell came on the line 30 seconds later. Walter, what are you doing at the house? You should be at Sunset Manor. I should be wherever the hell I want to be, counselor. This is still my home until Friday, according to your paperwork. Walter, you're not supposed to be living alone. The guardianship order was based on fraudulent medical evaluations and forged documents. I have proof. Silence on the other end. Then, Walter, I think you're confused. I'm confused about how a lawyer with your reputation got involved in elder abuse. I'm confused about how property transfers were filed in my name when I was locked in a memory care facility. But I'm not confused about the law. More silence. Mitchell, I want you to listen very carefully. Tomorrow morning, I'm filing complaints with the Bar Association, the District Attorney, and Adult Protective Services. Tonight, I'm calling every local news station that might be interested in a story about how lawyers and doctors conspire to steal houses from grieving widowers. Walter, please don't do anything rash. The only rash thing I did was trust my daughter. Everything else has been very carefully planned. I hung up and immediately dialed the second number on my list. Dr. Williams answered on the third ring, sounding annoyed. This is Dr. Williams. Doctor, this is Walter Thompson, the patient you diagnosed with dementia after spending 15 minutes with me. Mr. Thompson, how did you get this number? Where are you? I'm at home, doctor. Remember home? The place you declared me unfit to live in? You shouldn't be alone. I'm calling Sarah. You're not calling anyone until we finish our conversation. I have some questions about your diagnosis. Mr. Thompson, you're clearly having an episode. The only episode I'm having is a moment of clarity. Tell me, doctor, when did you first meet my daughter? Pause. I don't understand the relevance. When did Sarah first contact you about my case? Longer pause. I'd have to check my records. Don't check anything. Answer the question. When did my daughter first ask you to evaluate me? Mr. Thompson, I can't discuss patient confidentiality. I'm the patient, you bastard. There's no confidentiality between me and myself. The anger in my voice seemed to surprise him into honesty. She contacted me in February. Said her father was showing signs of cognitive decline and needed evaluation. February. A full month before I'd shown any symptoms. Before the coffee maker incident. Before I'd started forgetting things. And when did you write your first report declaring me incapacitated? Mr. Thompson. When? March 20th. March 20th. 2 days before I'd first met him. 2 days before he'd supposedly evaluated me and found me mentally incompetent. Doctor, I want you to explain to me how you diagnosed dementia in a patient you'd never examined, based on information provided by a daughter who stood to inherit a house worth $650,000. The line went quiet for so long, I thought he'd hung up. Mr. Thompson, I think there may have been some miscommunication about the timeline. There's been no miscommunication, doctor. There's been fraud, and you're part of it. I hung up and sat back in Eleanor's chair, feeling something I hadn't felt since the day she died. Satisfaction. Not happiness, that was probably gone forever, but the deep satisfaction of a man who'd identified his enemies and was preparing to destroy them. The phone rang immediately. Sarah's number on the caller ID. Hello, sweetheart. Daddy, where are you? Sunset Manor called. They said you were missing. I'm not missing, Sarah. I'm exactly where I belong. At home. Daddy, you can't be alone. Dr. Williams says a lot of things. Most of them lies. Just like you. Sharp intake of breath. Daddy, you're scaring me. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months. Clear enough to add up the numbers, Sarah. Clear enough to read property records and bank statements. Clear enough to understand what you've done to me. I don't know what you think you've discovered. I've discovered that my daughter is a thief. that she used my grief to convince me I was losing my mind so she could steal my house and lock me away somewhere I couldn't interfere with her plans. Daddy, that's not $75,000, Sarah. That's what you paid for your Tesla, isn't it? $75,000 from my account, authorized by power of attorney documents I signed under false pretenses. Silence. Sarah, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You have until noon tomorrow to return every penny you've stolen and halt the sale of this house. If you don't, I'm going to the police with evidence of fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. Daddy, please. And Sarah, I'm recording this conversation, just like I recorded my calls with Mitchell and Dr. Williams. So think very carefully about what you say next. I wasn't recording anything, but she didn't know that. Daddy, I was trying to protect you. You were trying to rob me. There's a difference. I hung up the phone and walked to the kitchen window. In the distance, I could see the lights of Sunset Manor, where Eddie was probably sitting in his chair, staring at nothing, forgotten by children who'd found it easier to warehouse him than care for him. But I wasn't Eddie. I wasn't going gentle into that good night. I was Walter Thompson, and I was taking my life back. Judge Patricia Morrison had the kind of face that belonged on currency. Stern, weathered, impossible to lie to. She'd been hearing cases in Springfield County for 23 years, and her reputation for seeing through bullshit was legendary among the local bar. I sat in the back of her courtroom at 8 a.m. sharp, wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence that would either restore my life or land me back in a memory care facility for the rest of my days. Sarah arrived 15 minutes later with an entourage that looked like a funeral procession. Attorney Mitchell, Dr. Williams, a woman I didn't recognize who was probably a social worker, and Crawford, the lawyer who'd been so eager to liquidate my life. She looked composed, professional, like a concerned daughter dealing with a family tragedy. She didn't see me until the bailiff called the case. Thompson, Guardianship Review. Case number 2024 GR 1847. When our eyes met across the courtroom, I saw something flicker in her expression. Not guilt. I wasn't sure Sarah was capable of guilt anymore, but uncertainty, like a poker player who'd just realized her opponent might not be bluffing. Your Honor, Mitchell began, we're here because the ward, Walter Thompson, has violated the terms of his supervised care by leaving his residential facility and returning to his home without authorization. Ward, like I was a child instead of a man who'd fought for his country and built a business and raised a daughter who was now trying to have me declared incompetent. Judge Morrison consulted her files. Mr. Mitchell, remind me of the basis for this guardianship. Cognitive decline, Your Honor. Progressive dementia with episodes of confusion, aggression toward neighbors, and inability to manage basic activities of daily living. And where is Mr. Thompson now? Present in the courtroom, Your Honor, but he's refusing to return to supervised care. Judge Morrison looked over her reading glasses at me. Mr. Thompson, do you have representation? I stood up. I'm representing myself, Your Honor. Sir, given the nature of this proceeding, I strongly recommend. Your Honor, I've brought evidence that this entire guardianship was obtained through fraud. I respectfully request the opportunity to present that evidence. A murmur went through the courtroom. Mitchell was already on his feet. Your Honor, the petitioner's mental condition makes him unable to participate meaningfully in these proceedings. Sit down, Counselor. Judge Morrison's voice cut through the objection like a blade. Mr. Thompson, approach the bench. I walked to the front of the courtroom, passing Sarah's table. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Mr. Thompson, I'm going to ask you some questions. Answer them clearly and directly. Yes, Your Honor. What day is today? Thursday, April 18th, 2024. Where are we? Springfield County Courthouse, Judge Morrison's courtroom. Why are you here? Because my daughter had me declared mentally incompetent so she could steal my house and put me in a nursing home where I couldn't interfere with her plans. Another murmur from the gallery. Judge Morrison's expression didn't change. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Thompson. Do you have evidence to support it? Yes, Your Honor. May I present it? She gestured to the witness table. Proceed. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the documents I'd gathered. Property records, bank statements, medical evaluations, timelines that showed the systematic dismantling of my life. Your Honor, this is the original deed to my property, showing that I purchased 412 Maple Street in 1987 with my late wife. The mortgage was paid in full in 2010. I handed her the documents. She reviewed them carefully. This is a power of attorney document allegedly signed by me on March 22nd, giving my daughter control over my finances. But, Your Honor, this document was dated 2 days before I ever met Dr. Williams, who wrote the medical evaluation that declared me mentally incompetent. Judge Morrison looked up sharply. Dr. Williams, you're present in this courtroom? Dr. Williams stood reluctantly. Yes, Your Honor. When did you first examine Mr. Thompson? March 24th, Your Honor. But your evaluation is dated March 20th. How did you evaluate a patient you hadn't yet met? The courtroom went silent. Dr. Williams loosened his tie. There may have been an error in the documentation, Your Honor. Sometimes preliminary assessments. Doctor, did you or did you not examine Walter Thompson before writing an evaluation that declared him mentally incompetent? I may have relied on family reports and preliminary consultations. Yes or no, Doctor? No, Your Honor, I had not examined him. Judge Morrison's expression could have frozen water. Continue, Mr. Thompson. I pulled out the bank statements. Your Honor, within weeks of obtaining power of attorney, my daughter withdrew over $100,000 from my accounts. $75,000 of it was used to purchase a Tesla automobile while I was locked in a memory care facility. Mr. Mitchell, how do you respond to these allegations? Mitchell stood, but his usual confidence was gone. Your Honor, the withdrawals were for legitimate care expenses. A $75,000 car is a care expense. The guardian needed reliable transportation to oversee the ward's care. Counselor, I've heard enough. Judge Morrison turned back to me. Mr. Thompson, do you have more evidence? Yes, Your Honor. I have recorded conversations from yesterday evening where Dr. Williams admits to writing medical evaluations before examining me, and where my daughter acknowledges withdrawing money for personal purchases. I was lying about the recordings, but the effect was immediate. Sarah whispered urgently to Mitchell, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Judge Morrison reviewed the documents for several long minutes. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, she looked up. Mr. Thompson, in 30 years on this bench, I've seen a lot of family disputes. I've seen children who genuinely care for aging parents, and I've seen children who see those parents as obstacles to inheritance. This case falls clearly into the second category. She turned to face the courtroom. Based on the evidence presented, it's clear that Walter Thompson was the victim of a systematic fraud designed to separate him from his property and his autonomy. The medical evaluation that formed the basis of this guardianship was written before the doctor had ever examined the patient. The power of attorney was obtained under false pretenses, and the guardian immediately began liquidating assets for personal benefit. Sarah was crying now, but Judge Morrison wasn't finished. Mr. Thompson, you are not mentally incompetent. You are not dangerous. You are not unable to care for yourself. What you are is the victim of elder abuse perpetrated by someone who should have protected you. She banged her gavel once, sharply. This guardianship is hereby terminated immediately. All powers of attorney are revoked. Mr. Thompson, your property and financial autonomy are restored. She turned to Sarah's table with the kind of look that had probably sent hardened criminals running for cover. Ms. Thompson, you have 72 hours to return every penny you've taken from your father's accounts. The sale of his property is hereby enjoined pending full restitution, and I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for possible criminal charges. The courtroom erupted. Sarah was sobbing. Mitchell was gathering papers like his career was on fire. Dr. Williams had already slipped out the back door, but all I heard was Judge Morrison's voice, clear and final. "You're not crazy, Mr. Thompson. You were betrayed." 3 months later, I sat at Eleanor's old writing desk in what was once again my house, holding a pen over the cream-colored stationery she'd saved for important occasions. The paper still smelled faintly of her perfume, or maybe I just imagined it did. Outside, autumn was painting the maple trees the same colors they'd been when Eleanor and I first moved to this house 37 years ago. Some things endure, despite everything that tries to destroy them. The legal battles were over. Sarah had returned most of the money, what was left of it after lawyers' fees and the car payments she couldn't afford. The Tesla had been repossessed 2 weeks after the court hearing. Some justice comes naturally. Dr. Williams had lost his license. Mitchell was facing Bar Association sanctions. Crawford's practice was under investigation for elder abuse. The dominoes had fallen exactly as they should. But Sarah was the reason I was writing this letter. "My dearest daughter," I began, then stopped. Was she still my daughter? Biology said yes, but something deeper had been broken that couldn't be fixed with court orders or returned money. I started again. Sarah. That felt right. Not cold, but honest. The criminal charges had been dropped. The prosecutor said it would be difficult to prove intent to defraud when the victim was family, and the defendant could claim she genuinely believed her father was incapacitated. Legal technicalities that protected her from prison, but couldn't protect her from the truth of what she'd done. She'd tried to visit twice since the court hearing. Both times I'd watched from the window as she sat in her driveway, in an old Honda now, the kind of car she could actually afford, working up the courage to knock on the door. Both times she'd driven away without getting out of the car. I understood. What do you say to the father you tried to erase? How do you apologize for treating someone's life like it was yours to liquidate? Sarah, I wrote, I've been thinking about forgiveness. That was true. For 3 months I'd wrestled with anger and hurt and a sense of betrayal so deep it felt like grief all over again. Some days the rage would hit me like a physical force, making me want to drive to her apartment and demand explanations for the unexplainable. Other days, I just felt empty, like the daughter I'd raised. The little girl who'd painted her bedroom walls pink and insisted on helping me build her treehouse even though she was afraid of heights, had died somewhere along the way, replaced by a stranger who saw me as a problem to be solved rather than a father to be loved. The thing about forgiveness, I continued, is that it's not about what you deserve. It's about what I need to do to keep living. And that was the truth I'd discovered in the quiet months after the courtroom drama ended. Carrying hatred for my own daughter was like swallowing poison and expecting her to die. It was killing what was left of me, day by day, choice by choice. I know you convinced yourself you were helping me. I know you probably believed, at least at first, that I was really losing my mind. Grief can look like a lot of things, and confused sadness might have seemed like dementia to someone who wanted to see it that way. I paused, remembering those early days after Eleanor's death when I really had been lost. When getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain, when simple tasks seemed impossible, when the future looked like nothing but empty days stretching toward an empty grave. Sarah had seen me at my weakest and mistaken weakness for incompetence, or maybe she'd just seen an opportunity and taken it. I'd never know which, and maybe it didn't matter. But somewhere along the way, helping me became helping yourself, and that's when you stopped being my daughter and started being someone I didn't recognize. The pen felt heavy in my hand. Eleanor had always been better with words, better at expressing the complex emotions that lived in the spaces between love and disappointment. I want you to know that I forgive you. The words looked strange on paper, like a foreign language I was trying to learn. Not because you've asked for forgiveness. You haven't. Not because you deserve it. That's between you and your conscience. I forgive you because I'm 71 years old, and I don't have time to waste on hatred. That was the practical truth. I had maybe 10 good years left, maybe 15 if I was lucky. Did I want to spend them poisoned by anger toward the child I'd loved more than my own life? I also want you to know that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen, or that we can go back to the way things were before. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Patterson working in her garden. We'd talked over the fence last week. Really talked, not the careful conversations of the past year. She'd apologized for believing I was dangerous, for treating me like a stranger in my own neighborhood. I was scared, she'd admitted. Sarah seemed so certain that you were becoming someone else. And after what happened to my mother before she died, I wanted to believe someone was looking out for you. Someone was looking out for me, I'd thought, just not in the way any of us expected. The house is mine again, I wrote. The money you didn't spend is back in my accounts. The legal mess is cleaned up. But the trust is gone, Sarah. That's the thing you can't give back, no matter how many apologies you might write or how much regret you might feel. I sealed the letter in one of Eleanor's good envelopes, the kind with our address embossed in gold letters. Then I walked to the mailbox, my mailbox at my house, on my property, and raised the red flag that would summon the postman to carry my words across town to the daughter who used to live in my heart. Back in the house, I made coffee in the machine that had given me so much trouble a year ago. Funny how mechanical things seem to work better when your world wasn't being systematically dismantled around you. I sat at the kitchen table with Eleanor's picture, just like I had on that day when everything changed. But this time, when I talked to her photograph, the words came easily. I did it, sweetheart. I fought back and won. The house is ours again. Eleanor smiled back at me from behind the glass, frozen in that moment at our 40th anniversary when everything still made sense and daughters still called their fathers to check in instead of checking up. I forgave her, I told Eleanor's picture. I don't know if that makes me a good man or a foolish one, but it makes me a free one. Outside, autumn continued its work of letting go, leaves falling to make room for new growth, seasons changing because that's what seasons do. Some endings are beginnings in disguise. I was 71 years old. I'd survived war and loss and betrayal. I'd been stripped of everything and found the strength to take it back. And I was still here, still fighting, still choosing grace over grudges and hope over hatred. That felt like enough. That felt like victory. That felt like the end of one story and the beginning of whatever came next. And there you have it, friends, how I went from a memory care prison to freedom in my own home. Tell me, was I right to forgive Sarah? Or should some things be unforgivable? Drop your thoughts below. I read everyone. Thank you for standing with Sarge through this. Like if you felt my pain, subscribe to join our family and hit the bell. The next tale will shock you even more.